Hey there, friends. Yep, back here at the north with a nice cold. Tony's got a coffee. I got my morning beer.
The morning's starting a bit slow for me, so the coffee
is.
first. What are you going to do?
It is. What do you do? At the north, man.
We are here. You know, Michael, I got to tell you, I've been thinking a little bit because, of course, you're getting ready to go off on a bit of a journey, and I am too. Do you hear that music? Isn't that fantastic? Maybe not, but yeah.
It is. It is what it is.
You got to be flexible.
It is.
This is what people do. So we're getting ready to leave, and of course, when you leave temporarily, perhaps a community wherever you are, and then you're on your boat. Now we'll talk voyaging some other day. When you're leaving a community, you got to ask yourself, like, what's the role between individuals and community? And we both agree that you need a compass. There's one at the north. I don't know if it works for you. It's working for us this morning. So, Michael, I think we should talk a little bit about community and individuals.
And I think a video or two ago we did talk about community.
Yeah.
And there's everything's a community, right? There's communities within communities.
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
So we also talked about being individual,
Yeah.
being the best I can be. Why am I being the best I can be? Is for the benefit of the community, right?
Yeah. So I mean, Aurelius talks about this. I've been rereading Aurelius. Every time I reread him, I get something new. And I've been kind of fixated on his discussion about civic duty and what happens when you come across difficult individuals. He gives us some pretty solid advice about that's not your problem. Like, you as a Stoic, just accept that they're part of the natural order of things. They're part of the logos. How could you be who you are without that opposition sometimes from difficult people? But then he gives us a little bit of a suggestion that we're supposed to, through our examples and maybe even through talking to them, help to sort of bring them around a little bit. And I thought to myself, that's complicated.
It is complicated. Earlier, I told you a little story, right? About how when we first got up here, we had this little group, a WhatsApp group amongst the community of cruisers that was actually quite. Would you say? What's the word? Inflammatory. It was just a little inferno of coming out of this political season as happens.
A lot of politics and stuff in there.
I hate these terms. Far right, far left.
Yeah.
Just being awful to each other.
Hateful, positively hateful.
So, like Aurelius called us to do, is to be an example, right? We're compelled.
Exactly.
How do you find yourself compelled to still the waters a little bit?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
So,
and that's a great example because, of course, I would read these things because these are our compatriots in the harbor, people on boats, some people on land. These are people I know, I see, I break bread with them when we're at a restaurant, we drink a couple beers together. I can honestly say, virtually everyone, like wonderful people, I enjoy spending time with them. Put them on that discussion forum and they became positively hateful in many cases. To the point where at one point my wife looked at me and said, you gotta stop reading that shit, you're getting angry and you don't even know why. So wisdom comes from a variety of places sometimes. But the problem is, of course, how do you engage with that, or do you engage with that?
I told you, like I told
you,
one of our friends ran that whole conversation through his little AI little perspective, and it basically dialed down exactly and critiqued everyone who it was.
You got it.
And then here was little Captain Michael at the bottom, and I didn't say much, and every now and then I'd be compelled to put something in there.
Yep.
And said, hey, look, it's obvious that this guy is trying to build community. Now, how do I do that? I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't think you're supposed to know. Anyone that gets real focused and purposive about building community, maybe a little bit suspect in my opinion, but that's a strong statement. But here's what I do know, and what I used to teach as well. Strong communities come from strong individuals. And that doesn't just mean strongly held beliefs, it may or may not be, but strong individuals, in my mind, I use a very specific word. You may groan at it, but I don't know. I use the term authentic.
Oh, I love that word.
Okay.
I mean, if we're not authentic, then who are we?
Yeah. So from my viewpoint, authenticity is the core for the individual, and authentic people build authentic communities. It sounds pretty trite, but I think that's
so now I'm going to put that little variable in there.
Yeah, go for it.
The dude out there that's running a big cartel,
Yeah.
selling drugs,
Sure.
doing illicit things. Is
Yeah.
he authentic to himself?
Ooh, wow.
Right.
That's
So
complicated.
where does that
Yeah.
come?
So I mean, if
I had to go there.
yeah, no, you have to, and that's cool. I mean, authenticity in and of itself, the way that I came to it philosophically, is kind of value neutral outside of the authenticity. That means, I guess, if you really wanted to go there, you could argue that like ends justifies means and all that sort of stuff. And we could talk about bad people or good people, but they could still be authentic. I'm not down with that, as you probably guessed. So,
I just put that in there.
no, you're a shit disturber, and I appreciate that. Captain likes to push me. That's a good thing. So here's what I think. Authentic individuals are trustworthy, first and foremost. Trustworthy is complicated, but there's a couple things that we know are trustworthy. One is true to themselves, yes, so that's the authentic piece, but trustworthy is also consistent. And one thing we know generally about people that are living in ways that we may not think of as wholesome entirely, they tend not to be as consistent, let alone wholesome. So there's a consistency piece in there.
There is a consistent way.
We're not getting it all, but we're starting to crack the nut a little bit, okay? And the other thing is, when we talk about community, we're not just talking a collection of people. That's a group. I could go out to the town square.
I agree with that.
We go to the town square, watch
And there's
them
a gaggle of people there.
Yeah, exactly. And there they are. And some people know each other and some don't. And some, will share something, some won't. Some will be standoffish, some will be gregarious. But a community has something to do with shared values. And it's really hard to share negative values.
It's
possible, but it's hard. It's hard.
So we can certainly rally around that.
Yeah, exactly. And for a time that may be the case, but self-interest is a double-edged sword. As you know, someday we're going to talk about rugged individuals, but we're not going to do that right now.
No.
So what my father used to call enlightened self-interest, I think is the precursor to everything. That means recognizing that you've got to take care of yourself first and properly, but with the understanding that that's so that you can give to others in a way that's even more than you could otherwise.
Right. And in so doing, you gain
exactly
what you need.
So self-interest and selfishness, they're not exactly the same. And the thing that's cool about self-interest is that self-interest done right, with a little bit of luck and some persistence, usually gives you far more back than you could ever imagine.
When we understand it is in my interest.
Yes.
In my interest to participate.
Exactly.
Participate in this community.
Yes.
And maybe this community too.
Yeah.
And maybe this community too, which forms the larger community.
Okay, you solved the problem for me then, okay? You solved the problem Aurelius had too, and he didn't quite know he had it, although when he wrote to himself, he did have.
You knew where I was going.
Yeah, I knew, but we got to get there, man. We got to speak it out loud. Otherwise, I'm trying to read minds, and that never works. So here's what I think. Aurelius recognized that communities come and communities go, in the sense that some of them arise and disappear, and then we move through time. I mean, what people forget about Aurelius was, not only was he essentially an emperor, for lack of a better term, okay,
he was an emperor.
Yeah, and, he went off on sorties to take care of the frontier lands, which is to say wage war and deal with violence in his own violent way, as one would. He'd be gone for upwards of 2 to 3 to 5 years in some cases. So when he talks about community, and he talks about civic duty, he could even be far away from the community he's talking about, still trying to do civic duty. You're talking about the fact that we can be parts of different communities, and some come and some go. Through our lifetime, that's the case. The people I might have hung out with and tried to contribute to when I was, 17 or 18, they're very different than, I'm in my late 50s now. Doesn't diminish things, doesn't make it more important either. These things come and go. The logos has its own ebb and flow.
It does have an ebb and flow.
So, we have to be, oh my God, we got to be rigidly flexible. you got that worm in my head, and I don't know I'm happy about it, but I'm starting to say it, okay?
I'm an evil man.
Yeah. So I think in this roundabout way, we're coming around to the idea that communities are beneficial for us and for others. They come and they go, they're not static, so they're ever changing. And the way to deal with the fact that you become members of certain communities and you exit others, that you choose to participate or you don't, really has a lot to do with authenticity. And that means, damn it, a large amount of self-knowledge, time, effort.
Right. So within that community, we find ourselves in a community. What is our burden to change that community? I mean, or
Yes.
you know,
Oh my God.
which is what we try to do,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right.
So Aurelius struggles with this too. In fact, all classic Stoicism struggles with this. So here's the problem. On the one hand, the people that we may not agree with, in communities or otherwise, are part of the logos. Aurelius even says, how could I be me without them? And yet at the same time, we're supposed to act as a great example and focus on giving them the opportunity to come more in line with the Stoic way of understanding logos. So you've correctly identified the problem, and I'm skirting the issue because I don't have an easy answer. But let's play with it a little bit in conversation. I think one of the things that we can do, and this is what I try to do in my own limited way, is explain to people our rationale behind decisions or opinions. Now, I tend to explain in detail, which makes me a bit of a laughing stock in the community.
No, I wouldn't
But
call it a laughing stock.
I'm the professor. So maybe not quite to the extent I do, but what I am saying is if people understand why you say the things you do, or how you come to bring your certain perspective to bear, that is an example to them.
Authenticity, consistency.
Yes, yes. And then, as a result, trustworthiness.
Okay, so I am my authentic self.
Yes?
I am being consistent. And to be consistent, maybe I have to draw a line.
Yes,
This line
yes.
I will not step across.
Right.
And this line I will not allow you to step across.
Yes. So now we're talking about boundaries, the favorite word in the psychobabble of our times. But the idea and exploring boundaries is useful. But recognize, when you set boundaries from a Stoic viewpoint, you set boundaries for you. You don't set boundaries for other people. First off, because you can't control them anyway.
You cannot.
Secondly, you have no idea why they do what they do unless they tell you and are authentic about it. So you could be setting boundaries for someone inappropriately, both because you shouldn't do it anyway, and also because you don't know what you're talking
It's ridiculous.
about.
The idea is whole.
What can we control from a Stoic viewpoint? Us.
Us and us alone.
That's right. So when we set a boundary, what we're saying is, for me, this is where it stops. And when you do that, maybe a bit of explanation. Not quite the professorial explanation, but a bit of
Okay,
explanation.
so now I'm following the path.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I've set my boundary. I said I will not go this way over to here, and
Yep.
you shall not cross this.
Exactly.
What happens? What happens when that boundary is crossed? Whose burden is that?
Right, right.
It's my burden.
Yes, it is.
All right, and so what are my responses going to be?
Now we're getting all very zen. I mean, you know, as you probably guessed, I won't put words in my, but I spent some time studying martial arts, and of course, most credible martial arts teach you that you become capable of doing all sorts of things when need be, so that you have to do nothing. Walking away
Is an option.
is an option, and it's a worthwhile option, and that option can be manifested more often than not.
So having, and for me, and all I can talk about is for me. I mean, we've seen it in this culture of
Yep.
I don't know how you describe this culture, but it's very loud.
Yes,
right?
I think you hear it. It's
right.
loud.
Well, no, I mean loud in opinions and
Well, that
places.
too.
We just
course.
talked about in that group,
Yep.
people, wishing for somebody else to be dead. It's just, So I mean, I could cross my boundary. I can get very loud.
Yep.
I get very loud, or, I mean, and I think about these things,
Yeah, I
right?
do
So
too.
I'm like, okay, this is my position.
Yep.
And what happens when somebody crosses that position? What is my response going to be? So I think about those
Yes.
in advance.
Yes. Yes.
And I know that you and I talked about this earlier. The Stoic term, the Latin term. Come on, dude. Come on,
no,
Professor,
you're
bring
killing
it.
me.
And I know we'll get a dozen
will.
comments that are
Yeah,
going to tell us exactly what it was. But in the chaos,
Why
we
don't
just
you
get.
comment to us about what you think the Stoic term? Bring out your Latin from grade school if you happen to study it.
Right. I mean, it's followed us. I mean, even how we do it. I mean, it's how we word plan, right? What's the
Right.
worst thing that can happen to
Exactly,
us? Right.
exactly.
So you got to look at our responses to that. So even in, my point is, even in our communities, as an individual that wants to be a part of the community,
Yes.
how do I exert influence without suffering my authenticity? and who I am.
And let's be clear. That's a healthy way to approach thinking about things that we might generally call conflict. I don't mean fighting, but conflict, differences of opinion, okay? What isn't healthy is to engage in something and then come back after and spend 3 weeks while you can't sleep,
Right.
ruminating about that. So this is the beauty of Stoicism. By taking responsibility to consider things beforehand, you make the interaction quite clean. You do what you've thought out to be reasonable. It may not be emotionally at the moment what you feel compelled to do, but you're in control of your emotions because you thought it through. And this is the antidote. One of the many antidotes, but it's a antidote, a Stoic antidote to rumination. Endlessly thinking about what if. You've already done that. You did it before you arrived in that situation.
So that you don't have to do it after.
It's freeing.
Yes.
Have we beat this one to death,
I
Michael?
think we have
I don't
beat
know
it.
if we understand any better.
We don't, but it's part of, again, it's a conversation, and we'll probably pick this same conversation up, you never know what the bug is.
Yeah.
What the bug that could keep this conversation going is your comments. We cherish those, we covet those.
You probably notice we respond to each and every one of them.
Bring them on. So hit that subscribe button, make a comment, and meet up with us again. Who knows where we'll be.
Whenever, wherever.
Whenever. All right, we're out.
Okay.